What's right is what's left if you do everything else wrong. This quote was brought to us by the inspirational genius Robin Williams. Reflects my goals for this school year for the course of ISM, and essentially means to me that I want to know what I can do wrong. That way I can figure out what's right for me. I understand that mistakes happen. However, whether or not what you choose to do with your mistakes determines who you are as a person. And as a young student, I know that my future reflects off what I do today. I want to point myself in the right direction and figure out what I want to do with my life, whether it's architecture or not, that I'm studying this year in ISM. My name is Trevor Hawley, and I'm a junior in the class of 2016. I heard about the ISM program from my freshman year in team leadership with Coach Goff. She described it as the best class possible for your high school career, and explained it to everyone in the class, telling you that it teaches you life lessons and how to conduct yourself as an adult. I would like to believe that I'm independent, hardworking, and loyal to the people who have earned my trust, the people who have my top priority in life, my friends and my family. Due to my time in Young Men's Service League, I've also learned many skills regarding working with people who are in need and just leadership talents. I've already said I'm a junior at FHS, and I'm also on the Frisco High School varsity baseball team. It's my first year on the team, and I come from an athletic family. My dad was on varsity baseball, my mom was varsity softball and cheerleading. I come from a Catholic family, church every Sunday. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and I plan on going to a 4-year college after graduation. My top choices are OSU and the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. I chose to take ISM this year because I want to figure out what I want to do after high school, and it was strongly recommended to me in Team Leadership 1. And overall, I'm interested in having the opportunity to really get a study in high school and learn something that you can't learn in the regular classroom. So for my first interview, I interviewed Luis Gomez, and he is the owner of GSO Architects. And we actually interviewed at a Starbucks off Main Street, and it was kind of nice because it was my first interview, and it was very relaxed, and I kind of got to get into the whole program of the ISM interview system. And essentially what he does is he owns a small scale commercial architecture firm, which they construct restaurants and other small buildings for potential clients. And he taught me to be a successful architect, you need to know how to run a business. So take business classes in college and not just focus on the arts of architecture. And he said probably the hardest part of his job is just dealing with clients that have too big of an idea that can't be brought down to realistic measures. And he said it can be very stressful. For my second interview, I interviewed with Ted Kolaha. He's a principal at Gensler, and Gensler is one of the largest architecture firms in Dallas and Texas and anywhere. And he's, to put it in perspective, he's in charge of the Dallas Cowboys training facility that's being built here in Frisco. So he says he has an extremely diverse workday. He's very different than Mr. Gomez in that, because he runs the business, he runs his team of workers, and he's the head designer. So hardest part for him would be just excluding certain parts of the design that are too costly, make things more functional and realistic to the client, so that way they fit into budget. My third interview was also at Gensler, and it was actually a surprise. Came right after my interview with Mr. Kayaha. It was just, he actually graduated from Frisco High School a few years ago, and he just graduated from Austin, University of Texas at Austin last year. So it was his first year working at a major firm. So he didn't have much experience, but he gave me insight of what an architect does right after college. And so he had little responsibilities at Gensler. For example, whenever I did meet with him, he was just doing touch-ups on animations and sketches. He wasn't really in charge of anything to his own self. My fourth interview was with Mr. Guy Courtney, and he actually ended up being my mentor. He is an interior architect, which is different than exterior or commercial. He works on the interior, cabinets and grooves of a room and buildings and the wiring and all that he's in charge of. So he taught me to understand all parts of architecture, not just one. That's what he said majorly. You need to learn how to work with the functionality of a building, not just the outward design or inward. Just know a little bit of everything. And he works both interior and exterior, but he also does interior design. So he picks the carpets and things like that. And he just said he recommends finding your niche in work. Don't just settle for something. And for my 5th interview and my last interview, I interviewed Barry Manners. He's a interior architect and a president and project manager of Intos Design. Mr. Manners works in both interior and exterior architecture, so he does the inside and outside of buildings. And he strongly recommended interning over summers at a firm and just working and learning the ways that architects, what they do and they're actually working and things like that. So I don't have all my research assessments on here. I just have some key points from ones. And so for my career outlook assessment, it showed that the purpose of that assessment was to figure out, just a brief overview of architecture. So typically architects start at a pretty low salary, which isn't a huge deal because it's easy to work your way up. But it's one of the more persistent and fastest growing fields in America at the moment because no matter what, you're always going to need buildings to be built, and someone's got to do it. And for educational requirements, to become an architect, one must earn a professional degree in architecture after completing a program, either a 5-year bachelor architecture degree, a 2-year master of architecture degree, and a 3 to 4 year master architecture program. And becoming an architect in Texas also requires you to have a certain amount of hours with interning, so that way you can hone your skills. And those hours depend on how many years in college you spend taking to get your degree. So I skipped my first 2 assessments because they didn't amount to too much. But my 3rd assessment goes over the top schools for architecture and why the schooling is the most important part of getting your degree. To be an architect, you can't just get your degree at some run-of-the-mill college. You need to get it at a good college, so it puts some weight behind your name. And so succeeding throughout the years, the top 2 colleges for architecture is Harvard and Cornell University. And every year, Design Intelligence ranks all the architecture schools in the United States. And it's based off the educational benefits, career possibilities, and percentage of graduates that find success. So it goes over a lot of things, and it essentially just states that architecture is very diverse, and you have to have a good education to do well in the field. You can't just wing it. For my 4th assessment, I looked up all the different types of architecture. As I said before with Mr. Courtney, he's an interior architect. And before I interviewed with him, I didn't really know that there was more than one, so I looked them up. And there are 6 main types of architects. There's residential, which is your houses and anything like that. There's commercial, which is office spaces or restaurants, any sort of public area. There's industrial, which would be your factories, dams. There's landscape, which would be your parks and recreation, and just anything that's outside greenery. And then there's interior, which is what my mentor is. And the most important thing is just to find where you fit. Don't just choose one based off of general idea. Choose something that you're actually good at and that you actually enjoy. So a little bit about my mentor. My mentor is Guy Courtney. He's a graduate from Texas Tech, and he's co-founder of Watermark Design. It's an interior architecture design firm in Dallas, but it also works as an interior design. He's very, very nice, very good talking person. He's personable, and he's willing to work with me for ISM. He doesn't want to boss me around or anything like that. He wants to help me. He was my 4th interview, and he was by far my best interview, I think. And an interesting thing about his firm, Watermark Designs, they do not do hardly any designs here in the DFW area. Most of their builds and projects they do are actually in Panama, so he's gone quite a bit flying to Panama and things like that. and they do a lot of multinational, like hotel designs and everything. So for my original work this year, I redesigned our fence in our backyard, and I conduct a architectural overlay and find the measurements, find the price estimates, and everything regarding that, because a few years back our fence blew over, and so it's just kind of like a lean-to at the moment. Not very pretty. So the objective of my project was to create a fence design that is both elegant and economically available for my backyard using my own knowledge. And the process would be to measure all the dimensions of the pre-existing fence, create a new fence design to replace the old fence, determine the amount of supplies needed, and then determine the cost of each supply so I can determine the total, including tax. So if I was to build the fence, we know how much it would be, and then create a rough outline of the finished project, and then create a final PowerPoint that goes over every little bit of the project, and then just edit it and refine it until it's in a perfect little neat presentation. So the purpose of the project was to give me hands-on experience on working with clients, which would be my parents and Mr. Courtney, who would help and give me ideas, and also just teaching me how to use certain basic tools and things to make it look neat and work in that standpoint. Because as Mr. Courtney says, the first part of any presentation to a client they see is your presentation itself, and so you want a presentation that looks neat and nice and isn't just ugly and disappointing to look at. So that was a big part of my goal, is to make a presentation that looked nice. So here's just here's all the slides. It's only 6 slides long. And so this is my cover page slide. And so on the cover page, it has to have the architectural plan, which would be this, just a rough sketch of it. It's not proportional or anything like that. It's just the basic plan. And then it has to have the index, which just goes over it's pretty much the page numbers and any certain labels on the page numbers, on the page, so you can find out what it means. You flip back to the index and determine what the symbol or icon is referring to. And a location map, which just gives you a brief idea of where this project will be at. So that would be where my house is at comparative to Frisco. And so the page must be neat, organized, it has to be inviting, and it just has to be generally neat to look at. After the cover page is the site plan, which is made to be all exact, perfect to scale. Everything is completely put in the way it's supposed to be, and then it has to have just a very, very brief, just kind of landscape on it. Just as you can see, what is the laser? That's a bush. It doesn't have to be very intense. It just has to show there is something there. And so it's important because it shows a detailed overview. So for the client to see, okay, he's put in actual effort. He knows the dimensions. He knows, what things need to be and where things are actually at. And then after that, there is the elevations, which just shows a detailed view of certain sides of the project. And so for my elevation page, I showed the front and back side of a fence. It just has measurements on it, and then it has the widths and everything, so for a client's perspective they can see how big it's actually going to be. And then after that you have the detail page, which goes over things that you would not see. You wouldn't, for example, on mine I have what's under the cement and how the cement works with the posts being put into the ground, and it has to have all the measurements, but it's supposed to be hand drawn to show that you know how to work, to know how to draw, because that's what clients want to see, is that you know how to actually work with a pencil and not just all CAD working. So it's essentially just to clarify ideas that would be not seen otherwise. And then here are my materials page, which shows all the costs and how many are needed. And then here's my total cost estimated, which I included tax, and it shows total what all is going to be needed to do. And this is not including labor, because labor wasn't a part of my plan. It was because it was going to be done for free. So there's that, and so both of those have to be exact. They can't just be a rounded, estimate of how much things are going to cost. It's supposed to be exact, so that way the client doesn't, has a budget, so they can work with your budget, and so you show that you have a certain price standpoint. So this year in ISM so far has taught me that I do not want to be an architect. And that's a great thing. I'm glad I took the class. I know that now. And I'm glad that I know that because I don't have to spend time and money in college pursuing something that I wouldn't have enjoyed to begin with. So overall, my goal is to consist of just finding what I want to do when I grow up. So I'm going to finish the year at architecture, and I'm going to work as hard as I can with it. But eventually I want to know what I want to be as an adult completely. So thank you for listening to my goals and my plan for this year in ISM. And I can't wait to finish out the year, my junior year in ISM. So thank you. That's it.